The desert wind carried the scent of death and dust through the abandoned streets of Al-Qadra, a town that had once bustled with life but now stood as a hollow shell of concrete and broken dreams. Captain Marcus Rivera crouched behind the crumbling wall of what used to be a bakery, his rifle pressed tight against his shoulder as he scanned the rooftops through his scope. Sweat dripped down his face despite the early morning chill, mixing with the grit that seemed to coat everything in this forsaken place. "Ghost Actual, this is Ghost 6, came the crackling voice through his earpiece. Lieutenant Sarah Chun, his communications officer, sounded strained. "No movement on the north side, but I'm picking up chatter on enemy frequencies. They know we're here." Marcus pressed his radio button twice in acknowledgement, maintaining radio silence as much as possible. His unit, call sign Ghost Company, had been inserted into Al-Qadra 3 hours before dawn with a simple mission: locate and extract a high-value intelligence asset who had gone dark 48 hours earlier. What they found instead was a carefully orchestrated trap that had cost them 2 good soldiers and left the remaining 8 members of his elite team scattered across the ghost town like pieces on a deadly chessboard. The morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows between the buildings that provided both concealment and potential hiding spots for enemy snipers. Marcus could hear the distant sound of boots on gravel, the occasional clink of metal on stone, and the whispered voices of men who spoke in a language he didn't understand but whose intent was crystal clear. They were being hunted. Staff Sergeant James Thompson lay wounded behind an overturned car 30 meters to Marcus's left, a bullet having caught him in the shoulder during their hasty retreat from the town center. The medic, Corporal Lisa Rodriguez, was with him, but their medical supplies were limited, and Thompson was losing blood despite her best efforts. Time was their enemy as much as the armed militants who had turned Al-Qadra into a killing ground. "Captain," whispered Sergeant First Class David Kim through the radio, his voice barely audible. "I've got eyes on at least 12 hostiles moving through the marketplace. Looks like they're trying to flank us from the east." Marcus felt the familiar weight of command pressing down on his shoulders. Every decision could mean the difference between his soldiers going home to their families or becoming another casualty statistic in a war that seemed to have no end. He thought of his daughter Emma, who would be starting 2nd grade next month, and how she always asked him to promise he'd come back safe when he left for deployment. He had made that promise, and he intended to keep it. The sound of footsteps grew closer, and Marcus caught a glimpse of movement in a 2nd-story window across the street. He held his breath, finger resting on the trigger, waiting for a clear shot. The rules of engagement were clear, but in a place like this, hesitation could be fatal. He watched as a figure moved past the window, too quick for a clean shot, but enough to confirm that the enemy was closing in on their position. "All Ghost units, this is Ghost Actual," Marcus whispered into his radio. "We're about to have company. Check your 6 and watch your fields of fire. We don't leave anyone behind." The radio crackled with quiet acknowledgments from his scattered team. Sergeant Maria Vasquez was holed up in a building 2 blocks south with the team's demolitions expert, Corporal Brian Walsh. Their position gave them overwatch on the main road leading out of town, but it also made them visible to anyone with elevation. Private First Class Michael Torres, their youngest member at just 19 years old, was positioned in what remained of school building, his hands probably shaking as he gripped his rifle. Marcus had seen that look in young soldiers' eyes before, the moment when training met reality and everything they thought they knew was put to the ultimate test. The intelligence they had been given about Al-Qadra was wrong from the start. They were told it was a small cell of insurgents, maybe 5 or 6 individuals at most. Instead, they had walked into what appeared to be a major staging area for a much larger operation. The building showed signs of recent occupation, with ammunition caches, communication equipment, and enough supplies to suggest this wasn't just a temporary hiding spot, but a well-established base of operations. Marcus remembered the briefing back at the forward operating base, how confident the intelligence officers had been about the mission parameters. Simple extraction, they had said, in and out before sunrise. But Nothing was ever simple in a place where every shadow could hide an enemy, and every doorway could be a fatal funnel. His experience in 2 previous deployments had taught him to trust his instincts over intelligence reports, and his instincts had been screaming danger from the moment they approached the town's perimeter. The sound of automatic gunfire erupted from the direction of Sergeant Vasquez's position, followed immediately by the distinctive crack of a sniper rifle. Marcus felt his heart rate spike as he tried to raise her on the radio, but static was his only answer. The enemy was making their move, and his carefully planned extraction was turning into a desperate fight for survival. Ghost 6, I need a sitrep on Ghost 4's position, Marcus called to Lieutenant Chun, using Vasquez's call sign. Negative contact, Ghost Actual. Last transmission was 5 minutes ago, Chun replied, and Marcus could hear the concern in her voice even through the radio static. The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. They were outnumbered, running low on ammunition, and had wounded personnel who needed immediate medical attention. The extraction helicopter wasn't due for another 6 hours, and their chances of holding out that long seemed to diminish with each passing minute. Marcus had to make a decision that would either save his team or seal their fate. He spotted movement in his peripheral vision and swung his rifle toward a doorway where a figure had appeared briefly before ducking back into the shadows. The cat and mouse game was intensifying, with both sides trying to gain a tactical advantage without exposing themselves to enemy fire. Marcus knew that his opponents were likely local fighters who knew every street, every building, and every hiding spot in Al-Qadra. His team, despite their superior training and equipment, was operating on unfamiliar ground against an enemy who had chosen the time and place of this engagement. The weight of his gear seemed to press harder against his body as the temperature began to rise with the climbing sun. His Kevlar vest, loaded with ammunition magazines, radio equipment, and medical supplies, had felt manageable during the cool pre-dawn insertion, but was now becoming a burden that sapped his strength and limited his mobility. Every member of his team was carrying similar loads, and the combination of physical exhaustion, stress, and the oppressive heat was beginning to take its toll. Marcus thought about the families waiting back home, the wives and children who had said goodbye without knowing it might be forever. Thompson had shown him pictures of his twin daughters just last week, 2-year-old girls with bright smiles and their father's eyes. Rodriguez had mentioned that her mother was visiting from Mexico and was planning to teach her how to make authentic tamales when she got back from deployment. These weren't just soldiers under his command. They were people with lives and dreams and futures that hung in the balance based on the decisions he made in the next few critical minutes. The radio crackled again, this time with Private Torres's voice, higher pitched than usual with stress and adrenaline. Ghost Actual, I've got movement in the courtyard below my position. Looks like they're trying to plant something. Can you get clear shot? Marcus asked, already knowing that putting Torres in a position where he might have to kill someone would be another weight on the young soldier's conscience that he'd carry for the rest of his life. Negative, sir. Too much cover, and I can't be sure they're hostile, Torres replied, showing the discipline and restraint that Marcus had tried to instill in all his soldiers. The rules of engagement were clear, but not always practical in situations like this. They couldn't fire unless fired upon or unless there was clear hostile intent, but waiting for that clarity often meant the difference between living and dying. Marcus had seen good soldiers hesitate at the wrong moment and pay the ultimate price, just as he had seen others act too quickly and have to live with the consequences of taking an innocent life. Another burst of gunfire echoed through the town, this time much closer to Marcus's position. He could hear bullets impacting the concrete wall that provided his cover, sending chips of masonry flying through the air. The enemy was probing their defenses, testing their response times, and trying to identify their exact positions. It was a deadly game of chess where each move could trigger a violent response, and with the slightest mistake could result in checkmate. Marcus made a mental calculation of their remaining ammunition. Each soldier had started the mission with 6 30-round magazines, plus whatever specialized ammunition their role required. They had expended roughly half their ammunition during the initial contact and subsequent firefights, leaving them with enough for perhaps one more sustained engagement before they would be reduced to sidearms and whatever weapons they could scavenge from fallen enemies. The sun continued its relentless climb, and Marcus realized that the heat would soon become another enemy they would have to fight. Dehydration and heat exhaustion could impair judgment and physical performance just as effectively as enemy bullets, and his team was already showing signs of stress and fatigue. The mission that was supposed to last a few hours was turning into an endurance test that would push them beyond their limits. Lieutenant Chin's voice crackled through his earpiece again, urgent and concerned. "Ghost Actual, I'm monitoring multiple radio frequencies, and the chatter is increasing. Sounds like they're coordinating something big." Marcus felt the familiar chill that ran down his spine when a tactical situation was about to get worse. His years of experience had taught him to recognize the signs of an impending assault, and everything he was seeing and hearing pointed to a coordinated attack designed to overwhelm their defensive positions through superior numbers and firepower. The ghost town of Al-Qadra was about to become their potential grave, and Marcus realized that the next few minutes would determine whether his promise to his daughter would be kept or broken forever. The first coordinated assault came like a thunderstorm, sudden and overwhelming. Marcus heard the whistle of incoming mortar rounds a split second before the explosions rocked the building where he had taken cover. Concrete dust and debris filled the air, making it impossible to see more than a few feet in any direction. The enemy had been watching, learning their positions, and now they were executing a plan designed to flush the Americans out of their defensive positions and into the open where they could be eliminated systematically. "All ghost units, we are taking effective fire from multiple positions," Marcus shouted in his radio over the sound of automatic weapons fire that seemed to come from every direction at once. Displacement by fire and movement. Don't let them pin you down. But even as he gave the order, Marcus knew that movement meant exposure, and exposure in a town controlled by the enemy meant death. His soldiers were trapped in a nightmare scenario where staying put meant being slowly picked apart by mortar fire and sniper shots, while moving meant running through streets where every window and doorway could conceal a waiting gunman. The sound of Sergeant Vasquez finally came through on the radio, her voice strained but determined. "Ghost Actual, Ghost 4 is still in the fight. We took some shrapnel from the mortars, but Walsh is patching us up. We can see at least 8 hostiles moving through the marketplace from our position." Marcus felt a surge of relief, knowing that 2 more of his soldiers were still alive, but that relief was immediately tempered by the reality of their situation. 8 confirmed enemies in just one sector meant that the total number they were facing was likely much higher than the original intelligence estimate of 5 or 6 insurgents. They were outnumbered by at least 3 to 1, possibly more, and the enemy had the advantages of superior numbers, knowledge of the terrain, and prepared positions. Corporal Rodriguez's voice crackled through the static, urgent and professional despite the chaos around them. "Ghost Actual, Thompson needs immediate evac. He's lost a lot of blood, and I can't stop the bleeding completely with what I've got." The weight of command pressed down on Marcus like a physical force. Every leader faced moments when there were no good options, only degrees of terrible choices. He could order his team to break cover and attempt to reach Thompson's position, but that would likely result in more casualties. He could call for immediate extraction, but the helicopter was still hours away, and bringing it in under fire would be suicide for the aircrew. Or he could try to hold their positions and hope that air support or reinforcements would arrive before they were overrun. Private Torres's voice joined a radio chatter, high with adrenaline and fear. "Ghost Actual, they're setting up something big in the courtyard. Looks like a heavy machine gun, or maybe a mortar tube." Marcus realized that the enemy wasn't just trying to eliminate his team. They were setting up for a sustained siege. The mortars that had started the assault were likely just the opening move in a larger strategy designed to pin them down, wear them down, and eventually finish them off. His opponents were showing a level of tactical sophistication that suggested professional military training rather than the usual insurgent cell they had been briefed to expect. The sound of sniper fire began to punctuate the steady rhythm of automatic weapons, each crack of the high-powered rifle representing another attempt to pick off his scattered soldiers. Marcus could hear the distinctive whine of bullets passing close overhead, followed by the sharp impact of lead on concrete. Someone out there had good optics and knew how to use them, systematically searching for targets among the American positions. Ghost 6, I need you to get on the long-range radio and contact base. Marcus ordered Lieutenant Shun. Tell them we have troops in contact, multiple casualties, and we need immediate air support and medical evacuation. Already tried. Ghost Actual, Chin replied, her voice tight with frustration. Something's jamming our long-range communications. I can't reach anyone beyond our immediate area. The revelation that their communications were being jammed added another layer to Marcus's growing understanding that this wasn't a random encounter, but a carefully planned ambush. Someone had studied their operational patterns, predicted their likely insertion routes, and prepared countermeasures for their standard tactics. This wasn't just bad luck or faulty intelligence. This was a trap that had been months in the making. Marcus caught a glimpse of movement across the street and instinctively fired 3 quick shots in that direction. He couldn't tell if he had hit anything, but the movement stopped, and he allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. Every enemy he could eliminate or suppress improved his team's chances of survival. But ammunition was becoming a critical concern as the firefight continued. The temperature was climbing steadily as the sun reached its zenith, and Marcus could feel sweat soaking through his uniform despite the dry desert air. Heat exhaustion was beginning to affect his judgment and reaction time, and he knew his soldiers were experiencing the same degradation in performance. In training, they had learned about the effects of stress, fatigue, and environmental factors on combat effectiveness, but experiencing it in a life-or-death situation was entirely different. Sergeant Kim's voice broke through the radio static with urgency that made Marcus's blood run cold. Ghost Actual, I count at least 15 hostiles moving through the buildings to our north. Looks like they're trying to surround us. The tactical picture was becoming clearer and more desperate with each radio transmission. The enemy had superior numbers, prepared positions, communication jamming equipment, and intimate knowledge of the local terrain. They were executing a classic encirclement maneuver designed to cut off all escape routes and eliminate the American force through concentrated fire from multiple directions. Marcus realized that conventional defensive tactics weren't going to save his team. They needed to do something unexpected, something that would disrupt the enemy's carefully planned assault and create an opportunity for escape or rescue. But with wounded personnel, limited ammunition, and no way to call for immediate support, their options were extremely limited. The sound of heavy footsteps on gravel grew closer to his position, and Marcus prepared for close-quarters combat. He checked his pistol to ensure it was ready and made sure his combat knife was easily accessible. If the enemy breached his position, the fight would become personal and brutal, decided by reflexes, training, and the will to survive rather than tactical superiority or superior numbers. Corporal Walsh's voice joined the radio traffic, calm and professional despite the chaos around them. Ghost Actual, I've got demolition charges that could bring down part of the building we're in. Might create enough cover and confusion to allow some movement. Marcus considered the option quickly. Urban demolition was always risky, especially when friendly forces were operating in close proximity, but desperation was beginning to override normal safety considerations. Creating a dust cloud and debris field might provide the concealment his team needed to reposition or even escape, but it could also trap wounded personnel or bring buildings down on top of his own soldiers. The sniper fire was becoming more accurate and more frequent indicating that the enemy marksman was zeroing in on the American positions. Marcus could hear the distinctive supersonic crack of bullets passing just over his head, followed by the impact of rounds hitting the wall behind him. Someone out there was systematically searching for him, and it was only a matter of time before one of those shots found its mark. Lieutenant Chen's voice carried a note of desperation that she was trying hard to suppress. Ghost Actual, I'm picking up radio traffic suggesting they're bringing up more reinforcements. Sounds like vehicle movement from the south. The arrival of enemy reinforcements would tip the balance decisively against Marcus's team. They were already outnumbered and running low on ammunition. Additional enemy forces would make their position completely untenable. He realized that they had perhaps minutes rather than hours before their tactical situation became impossible. Marcus thought about the training scenarios they had practiced back at Fort Bragg, the carefully constructed exercises designed to prepare elite soldiers for exactly this type of situation. But no training scenario had ever captured the visceral fear, the oppressive heat, the smell of cordite and dust, and the knowledge that real bullets were seeking real flesh. The weight of responsibility for 8 lives pressed down on him like a crushing burden. The sound of automatic weapons fire intensified, and Marcus could tell from the audio signature that the enemy was using a variety of weapons, including AK-47s, PKM machine guns, and what sounded like a Soviet-era Dragunov sniper rifle. The diversity of weapons suggested either a well-supplied insurgent cell or possibly foreign military advisors who had access to professional-grade equipment. Private Torres's voice cracked through the radio with barely controlled panic. Ghost Actual, they're in the building across from me. I can see them moving through the rooms, and they're heading for the stairwell. Marcus realized that his youngest soldier was about to face close-quarters combat against multiple opponents. Torres had performed well in training, but actual combat was different from shooting at paper targets or participating in exercises where mistakes resulted in criticism rather than death. The 19-year-old was about to learn what every combat soldier eventually discovered, that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the ability to function despite overwhelming terror. The tactical radio chatter continued as his scattered team reported increasingly desperate situations. Ammunition was running low, medical supplies were nearly exhausted, and the enemy was systematically tightening the noose around their positions. Marcus realized that conventional military tactics weren't going to save them. They needed a miracle, or they needed someone to change the rules of engagement in their favor. The sound of a single rifle shot echoed across the town, different from the others, sharper, more precise, fired from a different direction entirely. Marcus looked up from his position, scanning the rooftops for any sign of the source, wondering if another enemy sniper had joined the fight or if something else was happening in the deadly chess game that had trapped his team in Al-Qadra. The silence that followed the unexpected rifle shot was more unsettling than the chaos that had preceded it. Marcus held his breath, straining to hear any sound that might indicate whether the shot had come from friend or foe. In the distance, he could hear urgent voices speaking in Arabic, their tones suggesting confusion and alarm rather than the confident coordination they had demonstrated earlier. Sergeant Kim's voice crackled through the radio, confused but hopeful. "Ghost Actual, did you see that? Someone just dropped the sniper that had us pinned down from the water tower. Clean headshot from at least 400 meters. Marcus felt a surge of possibility mixed with caution. Either they had unexpected friendly forces in the area, or the enemy was experiencing internal conflict that might work to their advantage. He scanned the skyline through his scope, searching for any sign of movement or muzzle flash that might reveal the location of their mysterious ally. Another precisely placed shot rang out across the town, followed immediately by shouting and the sound of running footsteps. Through his earpiece, Marcus could hear Sergeant Vasquez reporting that the heavy machine gun position that had been targeting her building had suddenly gone quiet. Someone with exceptional marksmanship skills was systematically eliminating key enemy positions, and they were doing it with surgical precision. All Ghost units, maintain position and observe, Marcus ordered, try to make sense of the rapidly changing tactical situation. Unknown friendly forces appear to be engaging targets of opportunity. Do not fire unless you have positive identification of hostile intent. The radio chatter from his team reflected a mixture of hope and bewilderment. After hours of being hunted and outgunned, the sudden shift in momentum was almost too good to believe. But Marcus had learned to be suspicious of good fortune in combat situations, especially when it arrived without explanation. Miracles happened in war, but they were often accompanied by unintended consequences that could be just as deadly as enemy bullets. Private Torres's voice carried excitement that made him sound even younger than his 19 years. Ghost Actual, I can see someone moving on the rooftop across town. Looks like they're repositioning to get a better angle on the courtyard where the mortars are set up. Marcus tried to get a visual on the mystery sniper, but couldn't locate the shooter from his position. Whoever was out there was using advanced fieldcraft to remain concealed while taking precise shots at ranges that required exceptional skill and equipment. The performance suggested either elite military training or extensive combat experience, possibly both. A third shot echoed across Alcadra, and this time Marcus caught a glimpse of muzzle flash from a building approximately 600 meters to the northeast. The position would provide excellent overwatch of most of the town while remaining concealed from ground-level observation. It was exactly where he would have positioned a sniper if he had been tasked with providing support for trapped friendly forces. Lieutenant Chin's voice carried a note of amazement that she was trying to suppress. Ghost Actual, enemy radio chatter is going crazy. Sounds like they're arguing about taking casualties from an unknown shooter. They're starting to pull back from some forward positions. The psychological impact of accurate sniper fire was often greater than the actual casualties inflicted. Marcus knew that even experienced soldiers could become paralyzed by the knowledge that an invisible marksman was hunting them, especially when that shooter demonstrated the ability to place rounds exactly where they wanted them. Fear was a powerful weapon that could disrupt enemy coordination and create opportunities for tactical advantage. Corporal Rodriguez's voice broke through the radio traffic with information that made Marcus's heart race. Ghost Actual, Thompson's bleeding has stabilized, and he's regained consciousness. The pressure from the enemy positions has decreased enough that I think we might be able to move him to better cover. The possibility of moving his wounded soldier to a more secure location represented the first good news Marcus had received since the mission began. But he was still cautious about exposing his people to movement across open ground, even if the immediate threat level had decreased. The unknown sniper's intervention had created a window of opportunity, but windows could close quickly in combat situations. Another shot rang out, this one followed immediately by the sound of an explosion in the distance. Marcus realized that their mysterious ally had just eliminated whoever was operating the mortar position that had been raining death down on their scattered positions. The tactical significance was enormous. Without indirect fire support, the enemy would have to rely on direct assault tactics that would expose them to return fire from his team. Sergeant Kim reported movement in the enemy lines that suggested confusion and loss of coordination. Ghost Actual, I'm seeing hostiles falling back from forward positions. Looks like they're trying to regroup somewhere to the south. Marcus recognized the signs of a force that had lost the initiative and was attempting to reorganize after suffering unexpected casualties. The systematic elimination of key personnel and equipment was forcing the enemy to abandon their carefully planned assault and adopt defensive postures. It was exactly the kind of tactical reversal that could turn a desperate defensive action into an opportunity for escape. The unknown sniper fired again, and this time Marcus was able to track the muzzle flash more precisely. The shot had come from what appeared to be a partially collapsed apartment building that would provide excellent concealment and multiple firing positions. Whoever was in there was using the urban terrain masterfully, taking shots from different locations to prevent the enemy from targeting their position effectively. All Ghost units, this is Ghost Actual, Marcus transmitted, making a decision that could save or doom his team. Prepare for tactical movement to consolidate our scattered positions. Unknown Friendly is providing Overwatch, but we need to take advantage of this window while we have it. The radio acknowledgement from his team carried a mixture of relief and apprehension. Movement meant exposure to potential enemy fire, but remaining scattered across multiple locations with limited ammunition and wounded personnel was ultimately unsustainable. They needed to get Thompson to proper medical care, consolidate their remaining resources, and attempt to establish communication with their base. Marcus caught sight of movement in his peripheral vision and swung his rifle toward a figure that had appeared briefly in a doorway before disappearing again. But this time, something was different about the movement pattern. It seemed hesitant, almost fearful, rather than the confident, aggressive posture the enemy had displayed earlier. The psychological impact of the sniper was clearly affecting enemy morale and decision-making. Private Torres reported that the building across from his position had been abandoned, with enemy fighters apparently retreating rather than continuing their assault on his location. The shift from aggressive offense to cautious withdrawal was happening across multiple enemy positions, suggesting that their opponents were losing confidence in their ability to complete their original mission. Another precisely placed shot echoed across the town, and Sergeant Vasquez reported that the observation post that had been directing enemy movement in her sector had suddenly gone dark. Ghost Actual, whoever our angel is, they're taking out command and control targets. Professional work. Marcus began to develop a picture of their mysterious allies' tactical approach. Rather than engaging targets of opportunity, the unknown sniper was systematically eliminating key enemy personnel and equipment in a way that would maximize disruption to their command structure and combat effectiveness. It was the kind of target prioritization that required not just marksmanship skills, but a deep understanding of military tactics and enemy organization. The sound of vehicles starting up in the distance suggested that at least some enemy forces were beginning a tactical withdrawal rather than continuing to press their assault. Marcus realized that the arrival of an unknown sniper had fundamentally altered the tactical equation, transforming a coordinated enemy attack into a confused retreat. Lieutenant Chen's monitoring of enemy radio traffic confirmed what Marcus was observing. Ghost Actual, they're reporting multiple casualties and requesting reinforcements or permission to withdraw. Sounds like their commander is having second thoughts about continuing this engagement. The opportunity to escape the trap was materializing, but Marcus knew that windows of opportunity in combat situations could close as quickly as they opened. If enemy reinforcements arrived, or if their mysterious ally ran out of ammunition or was eliminated, the tactical situation could reverse just as dramatically. He needed to move his team while conditions favored survival and escape. Corporal Walsh's voice carried excitement, mixed with professional caution. Ghost Actual, I can provide covering fire with the demo charges if you want to start moving people. Create enough noise and smoke to mask movement, and maybe convince them we have more firepower than we actually do. Marcus considered the option carefully. The psychological impact of explosions combined with continued sniper fire might convince the enemy that they were facing a much larger force than 8 scattered American soldiers. But demolition in an urban environment was always unpredictable, and he couldn't risk bringing down buildings on his own people. The mysterious sniper fired again, and this time Marcus heard something that made his blood run cold. The shot had been followed immediately by return fire from multiple positions, suggesting that the enemy had finally located their tormentor and was attempting to eliminate the threat. Their Angel of Mercy was now under direct assault, and Marcus realized that their window of opportunity might be measured in minutes rather than hours. The sound of sustained automatic weapons fire erupted from the direction of the apartment building where the sniper was positioned. Marcus could hear the distinctive sound of bullets impacting concrete, and the whine of ricochets as the enemy concentrated their remaining firepower on eliminating the threat that had disrupted their carefully planned ambush. Ghost Actual, came Sergeant Kim's urgent voice. Looks like they've spotted our guardian angel. Heavy fire directed at the building complex to the northeast. I count at least 6 shooters trying to suppress that position. Marcus felt the familiar chill of impending tactical disaster. Their salvation was under attack, and if the unknown sniper was eliminated or forced to withdraw, his team would once again face overwhelming odds with limited ammunition and wounded personnel. He had to make a decision that would either capitalize on the opportunity they had been given or watch it slip away into another nightmare of survival against impossible odds. Marcus made his decision in the space between heartbeats, knowing that hesitation would cost lives. All Ghost units, execute tactical movement now, bound by teams to the rally point at the school building. We help our unknown ally by getting out of their line of fire and consolidating our position. The coordinated movement began immediately, with years of training overriding the natural impulse to remain hidden when bullets were flying. Sergeant Vasquez and Corporal Walsh moved first, using the rubble from earlier mortar impacts as concealment while they bounded toward Private Torres's position in the damaged school building. Their movement drew enemy fire, but the shots were hurried and inaccurate, suggesting that the enemy was still disorganized and focused primarily on the sniper threat. Marcus provided covering fire as Lieutenant Shun helped Corporal Rodriguez move Staff Sergeant Thompson from his exposed position behind the overturned car. The wounded soldier was conscious but weak from blood loss, and moving him required exposing 3 people to potential enemy fire. Marcus held his breath as he watched them cross 30 meters of open ground, his rifle trained on windows and doorways where enemy shooters might appear. The unknown sniper's rifle cracked again from the apartment building, followed immediately by the sound of breaking glass and shouting voices. Even under sustained enemy fire, their mysterious ally was continuing to engage targets and disrupt enemy coordination. Marcus couldn't see the shooter's position clearly, but the muzzle flashes suggested someone with exceptional composure and skill continuing to fight effectively despite being outnumbered and under direct assault. Sergeant Kim bounded from his position toward the school building, moving in the irregular pattern that training had drilled into every soldier to avoid presenting a predictable target to enemy marksmen. His movement was smooth and professional, covering ground quickly while maintaining situational awareness and the ability to return fire if necessary. Marcus felt a surge of pride in his team's performance under extreme stress. The enemy fire directed at the sniper's position intensified, and Marcus could see muzzle flashes from at least 8 different weapons converging on the apartment building. The building's concrete construction was providing protection, but sustained automatic weapons fire could eventually suppress even the most skilled marksman. Their window of opportunity was closing rapidly. Ghost Actual, we're in position at the rally point, came Torres's voice, steadier now that he was no longer isolated and under threat of immediate assault. Thompson is conscious and responsive. Rodriguez says she can keep him stable for movement if we need to displace again. Marcus felt relief that his team was beginning to consolidate their scattered positions, but he was acutely aware that their unknown benefactor was sacrificing their own safety to provide the covering fire that made the movement possible. Professional ethics and basic human decency demanded that they attempt to assist the sniper who had saved their lives, but tactical reality suggested that 8 soldiers with limited ammunition couldn't significantly impact a firefight between one shooter and multiple enemy positions. The distinctive crack of the sniper's rifle continued at irregular intervals, suggesting that their ally was still alive and fighting, but was probably running low on ammunition or was being forced to constantly change positions to avoid being overrun. Each shot was followed by intensified return fire from enemy positions, creating a deadly game of cat and mouse played out across the rooftops and ruins of Al-Qadra. Lieutenant Shin's voice carried urgency mixed with amazement. Ghost Actual, I'm picking up radio traffic indicating that enemy reinforcements have been delayed or canceled. Sounds like whoever's in charge has decided this engagement has become too costly. Marcus realized that the psychological impact of accurate sniper fire had achieved what his outnumbered team couldn't accomplish through conventional tactics. The enemy commander was apparently reconsidering the wisdom of continuing an assault that had resulted in multiple casualties and the loss of key personnel and equipment. Fear was proving to be a more effective weapon than superior numbers. The sound of vehicle engines starting up in the distance confirmed Chen's assessment. At least some enemy forces were beginning a tactical withdrawal rather than continuing to press their attack. But Marcus knew that retreating enemies could still be dangerous, especially if they decided to use mortars or other indirect fire weapons to eliminate threats without exposing their personnel to additional casualties. Corporal Walsh's voice crackled through the radio with information that made Marcus's tactical assessment even more complex. Ghost Actual, I can see smoke rising from the apartment building where our Angel is positioned. Looks like they might have taken a hit, or maybe they're using smoke to mask their own movement. The possibility that their mysterious ally had been killed or wounded added another layer of urgency to Marcus's decision-making process. If the sniper was eliminated, the enemy might regain confidence and resume their coordinated assault. His team needed to be prepared for the tactical situation to deteriorate rapidly if they lost their unexpected fire support. Marcus made visual contact with the consolidated position at the school building and began his own movement across the dangerous open ground. Every step felt like an eternity as he anticipated the crack of a sniper rifle or the chatter of automatic weapons fire. But the enemy seemed focused entirely on the apartment building, allowing him to reach his team's position without drawing fire. All Ghost units accounted for and consolidated, Marcus reported once he reached the school building, feeling relief that all 8 members of his team were still alive despite the hours of combat. Thompson is stable, ammunition status is critical, but we're in a defensible position with good fields of fire. The unknown sniper's rifle fired again, this time from what sounded like a different position within the apartment complex. Their ally was apparently still mobile and effective, continuing to disrupt enemy operations despite sustained attempts to eliminate the threat. The persistence and skill levels suggested either exceptional individual capability or possibly multiple shooters coordinating their fire. Sergeant Vasquez reported movement in the enemy lines that confirmed the tactical shift Marcus had been hoping for. Ghost Actual, I'm seeing systematic withdrawal from forward positions. Looks like they're consolidating somewhere to the south, probably preparing to disengage entirely. The transformation from desperate defense to cautious optimism was almost too dramatic to believe, but Marcus had learned to accept good fortune when it arrived, even if he couldn't explain its origin. The intervention of the unknown sniper had fundamentally altered the tactical equation, transforming what appeared to be certain death into a possible survival scenario. Private Torres's voice carried excitement that he was trying to suppress professionally. Ghost Actual, I can see someone moving on the rooftop of the apartment building. Looks like they're displacing to a new position, but they're still in the fight. The confirmation that their mysterious ally was still alive and mobile provided Marcus with a crucial piece of information for his tactical planning. If the sniper could continue to suppress enemy movement for just a few more minutes, his team might be able to establish secure communication with their base and coordinate extraction or reinforcement. Lieutenant Chen's long-range radio suddenly crackled to life with a transmission that made everyone in the school building hold their breath. Ghost Actual, this is Falcon Base. How copy over? The restoration of communication represented another piece of good fortune that seemed almost miraculous given their situation just minutes earlier. Marcus grabbed the handset with hands that were steadier than he expected. Falcon Base, this is Ghost Actual. We have troops in contact, multiple casualties, and require immediate medical evacuation and close air support. How copy? Ghost Actual, we copy all. Fast movers are inbound to your location with medical evacuation following. Maintain your current position and mark your location with infrared strobes. Time on target 15 minutes. The knowledge that help was finally coming felt like a weight lifted from Marcus's shoulders, but 15 minutes was still an eternity in a combat situation. They needed to maintain their defensive position, protect their wounded, and hope that their ammunition would last long enough for rescue to arrive. The sniper's rifle cracked once more from the apartment building, followed by the sound of an explosion that suggested they had targeted an ammunition cache or fuel depot. A column of black smoke rose from somewhere in the southern part of town, and the enemy radio chatter that Sean was monitoring became increasingly frantic and disorganized. "Ghost Actual," came Walsh's voice with barely contained admiration. "Whoever our guardian angel is, they just convinced about 20 bad guys to pack up and go home. Professional work doesn't begin to describe what we just witnessed." Marcus looked at his watch and realized that the entire engagement, from the initial ambush to their current defensive position, had lasted exactly 8 hours and 37 minutes. 8.5 hours that had felt like a lifetime, where every decision could have meant the difference between his soldiers going home to their families or becoming casualties in a war that seemed to have no end. The sound of jet engines in the distance announced the arrival of close air support, and Marcus felt the familiar surge of relief that came with knowing that American firepower was about to tip the tactical balance decisively in their favor. But even as he prepared infrared strobes to mark their position for the incoming aircraft, he found himself scanning the apartment building where their unknown savior had made the stand that saved 8 American lives. As the F-16 Fighting Falcon screamed overhead and the sound of enemy vehicles departing echoed across Al-Qadra, Marcus realized that he would probably never know the identity of the sniper who had turned their certain death into miraculous survival. But he would carry the memory of those precisely placed shots and the courage of someone who had risked everything to save strangers in a forgotten corner of a war that most people back home try not to think about. The medical evacuation helicopter appeared on the horizon like a mechanical angel, and Marcus knew that Thompson would receive the care he needed and that all 8 members of Ghost Company would eventually make it home to the people who loved them. But the ghost town of Al-Qadra would forever be haunted by the memory of 8 minutes when an unknown hero had stood between death and 8 American soldiers who had promises to keep.